As of December 31st, we have 142 families enrolled in the 100 Families program that are active, and 366 children are involved in those cases. And you can see the breakdown. We started doing preventative cases. That means that they do not actually have a DHS case at all, but we're trying to keep them from having to have one by providing them the services they need to stabilize their families. We have 47 that are protective services cases with the department, and then we have 67 that are non-custodial cases. Their children are in foster care, but they are working hard to get their family back together again. So either way, our goals are to preserve and or strengthen and reunite families, and we are growing every month in the number of families that we're serving in a holistic, community-wide way. Just so I have broken down the charts this time. So normally I give you one chart with everybody. This chart is just with non-custodial cases. So there were 67 non-custodial cases. This is 10 months after launch. Our goal is to stabilize those families and reunite them and then bring them crisis to career. And you can see at the time of intake where they were. This is, I thought I would have a little pointer here. So transportation, we were in crisis level for 38% of the families. We were in crisis level for 42% of the families. For employment, that means they were unemployed and had no income. Yes?
Are you going to send out a copy of this PowerPoint?
I sure can. I have actually sent it to a few folks that have already asked me, but yes, I will send it to you as well. And 42% were unemployed. 33% had no GED or high school diploma. 17% were actively using, and 44% were homeless. So you can see that those are dire circumstances for people with children, right? For anybody, but especially for families with children. And then you can see that this one right here, the middle one, I've actually combined the 2s and 3s. I thought it would be actually easier for you to understand if I combined those two, because 2s and 3s are not crisis, they're not stable, they're somewhere in between. So, and we don't call someone stable until, like for employment, they're stable whenever they have a full-time job. So that means all these 2s and 3s in the middle there are people with maybe some income in the household. Maybe they receive child support, or maybe they get disability, or maybe they have a part-time job and some of those things. So they have income, but not stable income. And then of course the thriving is where we want everybody to be, and that takes quite a while to get there. But our first goal is to get out of the crisis. Number 2, stabilize. Number 3, bring them to a thriving status where they can support their families and not fall back into a rut again. So, as of December 31st, you can see the decrease in the crisis and the increase in the stability. And here in employment is one of the classic ones I really love, is that we had 42% without a job at all, no income from any source, and we moved people up. And as of December 31st, from 37% to 58%, we went that far in number of people that had full-time jobs. So that's very, very good. And then 7% had thriving jobs. And so that is very hard to get at, because we're talking about living wage jobs. That's what our entire panel with Miles last month was about. That's what the Future Fit program is about. There are flyers in the background. Just to tell you a quick story, one of our clients that are in the protective services cases attended Future Fit. He had a felony background that couldn't land him an interview at any good employer that provided a good paying wage. But he finished Future Fit and he got offered a $14.50 an hour job, and he's working it now. I mean, what a life-changing difference for his family that's going to make. He has 4 kids he's raising, and it's just really hard to survive on those lower paying jobs, especially the part-time ones, which is what a lot of our felons end up with. So the housing one is also substantial. So you're talking about going from crisis for 44% of the families all the way down to crisis of 9%. And the stability is really where it's at. So whenever you see that stability go up from 33% of the clients to 62% are now stably housed somewhere where DHS will say, yes, we'll let your children move back in with you in this home because it's safe, then that is huge. These are the protective services cases. You'll see, it's interesting because they're all pretty similar. There's not a huge difference percentage-wise between whether or not their children have been removed or they have a protective services case, because either way, they are in crisis. They are families in crisis. I guess one of the major differences is recovery. They're usually a little bit further along in their recovery. So at intake, you can see that 43%, only 12% were in crisis. That means actively using. 43% were seeking, they were in some sort of drug treatment. So they were actually seeking help already when they came through the door. That's probably one of the big reasons why DHS is able to work with them and keep them at home, because they are receiving help and are trying to get over that recovery issue. But another, it's just really sad because even with the children in the home, we had 22% of the families in crisis with food. That means they had no food stamps and no income. And then 47%, which is those 2s and 3s areas, which means they have some money, but they aren't stable in the food area. They might have a family member that they live with that helps provide food for now, those kinds of things. So it's not a crisis situation. I have no money and I have no food stamps and I'm depending day by day from the community to provide food for my family to eat. To a 2 or 3 where, I've got some ways to get food. And then a 4 where, I have enough money to buy food for my family. So I would call 2s and 3s food insecure, right? And I would call those crisis hungry. Those are families that are hungry. So you can see the difference in the housing as well. We're able to, once again, house those families that are in crisis, which is really exciting. These are the preventative cases. So if there's no DHS case, but we found a family that is in crisis in several areas, and without support from the community, things are going to get worse for them, a lot worse. And we know how that can go downhill really quickly, and we want to prevent trauma in children. Removing children, of course, the trauma has already occurred, and it's just devastating for a child to be removed from everything they know and love, and a lot of times switch schools and so many things. Sometimes split from their siblings. There's so many negative impacts on that child forever. So we've got to prevent that. That's preventative cases. It's also protective services through DHS. Jerry back there in the back, they work very hard to try to keep families together, and that's really important. So transportation, you can see that we had a lot of people in crisis in the area of transportation. So these preventative families, you can see they have all the same issues. In fact, most of them were homeless, and that's primarily because most of our clients we get that are preventative, well, about 60% of them are from the homeless shelter. So these are families that are really, really in crisis in housing, probably in every other, well, obviously in every other area as well. 64% of them weren't employed. They had no income from any source. And they're trying to take care of their families with no income from any source. That's not possible, obviously. So, the clients as of December 31st, you can see that we have moved them up. They, a lot of times this is like bus passes, or we find a way to provide them ways to work or to their classes, those kinds of things. Maybe we'll buy a monthly bus pass for them. It's harder to get to this stable area in transportation because that means you got to get a car, right? And I don't call them stable until that car is insured and is not on its last leg, right? Because if they're driving, and a lot of my clients I can't put there yet. I'm like, oh, you got a car, but you're driving around illegally, and in a minute, Miss Chief Baker back there is going to have to tell you that you're driving illegally, and that's going to cause all kinds of problems. So we're trying to make sure that they don't have future issues that are going to land them in jail because of unpaid fines and all of those cyclical effects of doing that. So anyway, that's hard to get to, and that's why I love 100 Families, because it's not just an individual approach. It's a population-based approach to addressing issues, which means that we as a community see these numbers and see, hey, transportation is an issue for a lot of our clients. We need to fix that. Why can't we get them? I have one of my families up here is paying $10 cab fee there and back every day for work because it's a overnight job. So, so when we have families that are just barely stabilized, that can cause a big drain on them and push them back the other way. So, I wanted to show you this really quick. I tried to show these in a different way. So I took all three of the areas, combined them, and these are the outcomes, and wanted to go ahead and give you numbers this time, which is something you don't normally get in these percentages. So at intake, 48% overall across all three areas of the program had no income from any source. 24% had insufficient income. They were part-time, or they just were barely making it. As of 12/31, we had 81% of our clients with income. That is astounding. 117 parents now have income, and that's amazing. 42% of those had stable income, so they had full-time employment, and 6% had living wage income. So, and that's where we're trying to get at. Man, it's hard, but one at a time on that. And so if you can, we have Future Fit registrations in the back. If they have a high school diploma or GED, it really is a good way to get someone from that stable job to a living wage job. So everyone in that class got offered, that got offered jobs so far is $13.50 to $14.50 an hour. There's only 20 spots, it's completely free. There's lots of options. We do know of, there's CNA apprenticeships, there's those get to living wage jobs. There's lots of opportunities. Please join our pro committee or find out. Charlotte's working hard on a list of all apprenticeships in our area across different employers. We've been working very hard to get that to the crisis to career model. Recovery at intake. So 16% at intake were actively using drugs or alcohol. 42% were stable or thriving. You move that forward to December 31st, and there were less than 3% actively using. 70% were stable or thriving. So that's very, very good. They hadn't used it in a long time. 27% were in treatment. Housing, there's 53% in crisis that were homeless. Sometimes that's living couch to couch, so it's not necessarily the HUD definition, but it's the McKinney-Vento definition. So I define that for you there. And that's 84 parents. 21% were in stable or thriving living conditions. You take that to as of 12/31, and only 10% were in crisis. 48% were stable or thriving, and 32% were in adequate housing, and that's 60 big difference between 21% in stable or thriving versus 48 for the overall clientele. I did go ahead and do one on food security because we had 33% in crisis at intake, only 5% as of 12/31. 25% were food insecure. We still had 23% food insecure, but we had 72% of our clients were food secure as of 12/31, which is really good. Yes?
Is there like a time frame that they'll go through before you count them as secure or thriving? So if somebody gets a $14 an hour job, they're gonna show up as thriving, but we're not tracking the retention of that.
We are tracking as mentioned. So as of 12/31, this is the sad part whenever, because I might have reported last month that they had a job, and then this month I report them as a 1 again, as in crisis again. So yes, it will show back up. So it may be, so you might see our charts sometimes get worse instead of better, right? And that would be because maybe our clients lost their jobs. And so as of 12/31, it would report them in crisis again.
Are you able to track like how long that there's, you know, thriving and stuff like that? Who stays thriving instead of
You know,
going down?
so far, everyone who is thriving has stayed thriving.
Awesome.
Now, stable is another thing entirely, because we got a lot of people that get full-time jobs and lose those jobs, especially when it comes down to they either have, you know, court, they have, they have visitation, they have counseling appointments, they have parent, they have all these things they have to go to, and they're constantly being pulled in so many directions that they miss a lot of work, and they lose a lot. A lot of my clients lose jobs. So that is hard. That is a very hard piece of what we do, is them calling me, 1 week and saying they have a job, and then 3 weeks later they don't have a job. And the judges see it and they're like, why is this so unstable, unstable in the employment? And it really is such a hardship. Just the scheduling of all the things they have to do, and the court stuff. A lot of times those court dates are not an excuse. I have clients that have court sometimes 3 times a month because they have court in different courts. and so when you have court 3 different days in a month, you're going to get in trouble 3 times for not going to work, so it's very, very hard for them to keep those jobs. And I just try to have a whole lot of grace for people, because also at the same time they're having transportation issues. They may, if it's a protective services case, they're having childcare issues sometimes, or anyway, because of the fact that they have a sick child. One thing you've got to remember is the lack of support systems our families have. Me, I have a child sick, there's 15 people I can call, right? There's, I'm like, if I don't get her, I'm gonna get her or her or her. And I'm like, will you please, and somebody in my family, in my network of close friends and family are going to help me. If I break down on the side of the road, someone in my network of family and friends is gonna come to my rescue. I don't have to sit there and worry about it myself. I don't even have to know how to change a tire. That's terrible, Karen. Anyway, but point is, our families do not have that. They have a very limited list of who they could call, and the people they would call are people they shouldn't call, possibly, right? Because they aren't necessarily, they're scared to call because they wouldn't either provide good care for the child, or maybe they'll say, oh yeah, for $10 I'll come out there and help you with your vehicle, and they don't have $10. So okay. So as of December 31st, and this is we had 15 family reunifications, home placements, and 16 protective services have been closed. Cases have been closed. Several have been moved in. Supervised visits, I think there's probably 2 more just about to be reunited this month. I'm really excited about that. I did have one that got put back into care. So I had my number at 16. I was so excited, and it came down to 15 for reunifications. And so we're working with her. It's because she lost her job, lost her house, you know, and so we've got to work on all those things with people. 9 families have moved from Thrive to Thriving Income, Crisis to Career. So that's basically the outcomes as of December 31st. We're going to